Thank you very much, Madison. Thank you very much. Well, let me first start to share my screen. Just give 1 second here. Just give me 1 second. I'm trying to find the location to share my screen. Okay, here it is. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, all good.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madison. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm actually thrilled to be with you today and to be co-presenting with the awesome, actually not, the phenomenal Asen Jalali, who's in New York today. So Asen, a couple words.
Hey everyone, I'm excited to be here. Wow, Bruno, thank you so much for that. Now the pressure is really on, but I'm also very excited to be here and show you a little bit about what we're doing. But yeah, Bruno, back to you.
Thank you very much. And then, by the way, my journey with Wiiisdom started over 9 years ago, and I've been dedicated to supporting our 500 plus customers for all these years. So thank you very much, Ace. So today, we are going to exchange about how to certify and build trust in your Tableau dashboards. So, over the years, I've had a lot of interactions with customers. And whenever I'd visit customers or going to conferences as Tableau next week, by the way, if you are at Tableau conference, make sure you let us know because we will have a booth there and we'll have an awesome party there next week. But anyway, each time we have some interactions with customers, whether it's Ace or some other members of the team, they always come up with three different recurring challenges. The first one that you see here, for example, is I consume dashboards and I know the data is wrong, despite all the data prep, despite all the work that I've done. So this is something I'm assuming we've all experienced, that you've experienced, because it's something that we hear all the time. So that's the first challenge that we'll be addressing today. The second one is, well, funny enough, is earlier this week, I was actually talking with a prospect, and he was mentioning his exec actually was supposed to report on 2025 budget planning. And he actually had 4 dashboards that were all having different numbers. So for him, it was really, the challenge was, hey, what is actually the version of truth? And then the last case that we have here, it's about performances. Well, Ace, you're actually more familiar than I am with performances. What can you tell us about that?
Sure. So I spent some time working at Tableau and the professional services team. And one thing we had to do was health checks on environments that had already been up for maybe a number of years, but for some reason now it's not performing well anymore. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It could be because the number of dashboards have grown, the number of data sources have grown, and everything is being refreshed all at once. There's a lot of different reasons for that. And we would use a lot of different tools to assess what were some of the indications there. Some of you on the call might be familiar with those tools like TabJolt or TabMon or LogShark and a series of different applications that were not only a bit difficult to use, but hard to maintain and spin up and code heavy with some dependencies. Well, with our application, we have a performance model that's much easier to use, and I'm excited to show you that, just so you can be more focused on the test itself as opposed to spending time troubleshooting.
And by the way, these challenges can be, of course, if you're on Tableau Server or Tableau Cloud, because in some cases you've got some SLAs to meet, whether you're using embedded analytics or not. So by the way, during this presentation today and then the demo, we've got like 4 different polls, and then we'll be sharing each time the results right after. So the first question is, today, what product of Tableau do you currently use? So and by the way, you can have multi answers to that. So are you using Tableau Server on-prem? This is number 1. Number 2, are you using Tableau Server on cloud? meaning you got a server on the cloud, whether you're using Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, whatever it is. Number 3 are using Tableau Cloud. Number 4 are using Tableau Desktop. So I'll repeat it. What product of Tableau do you currently use? And you can have multiple choice answers. Number 1, Tableau Server on-prem. Number 2, Tableau Server on cloud. Number 3, Tableau Cloud. And number 4, Tableau Desktop. So thanks. And Madison, can you share the results of the poll? Okay, so no surprise, 90% of the answers are Tableau Desktop. So this is the first answer. The second answer is Tableau Server on cloud. Of course, and especially today, a lot of our audience is actually federal, so it's actually not a surprise. And then the 2 other versions are Tableau Server on-prem and then Tableau Cloud. I'm actually really impressed to see it's you've got about 25% Tableau Cloud. That is really great. We've seen actually in the past year so many people going from Tableau Server to Tableau Cloud. So that is really cool. Thank you very much. Okay. So overall at Wiiisdom, our mission is to ensure So overall at Wiiisdom, our mission is to ensure each data source and dashboard are tested and certified to ensure you can make trusted decisions. So this is something that we're going to talk about today. To achieve that, we test, promote, and certify content at scale. We certify, and this is extremely important. There can be any quality process without a certification mark at the end that follows tests that were predetermined. Having such certification visible from your consumers, from the consumers in general, is key so that they know their sources and dashboards have been tested so that they can actually be trusted. So in terms of certification, this is the way that it looks like today with Wiiisdom. When you use Wiiisdom into it, this is how, so we've got this little watermark here that appears, and that will essentially say it is certified or decertified. Additionally, we've made our certification available on the Tableau Exchange. So of course, the automation part is not into it, but actually the certification itself is included in the Tableau Exchange. So additionally, the question number 2 is, when do you test your dashboards? Again, multiple choices are possible. Never. So do you never test your dashboards? Do you test randomly? When I'm aware there's an issue, before each workbook release, I have a CI/CD process. Again, when do you test your dashboards? Multiple answers are possible. Never. Randomly. When I'm aware there is an issue, before each workbook release, or I have a CI/CD process. So, well, let's see what the answers are, Madison. Okay, so, hey, that's good. Never, 7%. So that is actually pretty good. Randomly is 20%. When I'm aware there is an issue is 47%. And of course, before each workbook release is 53%. One thing I'm actually pretty surprised is no one has answered that they have a CI/CD process. So, which essentially mean is nobody yet in the audience today has got a governance, has got a process to automate all the testing. So this is actually good news on that. So, okay, so hey, Ace, when it comes to certification, what do we exactly offer? What type of granularity do we have on that?
Sure. So when it comes to certification, there are 2 pieces that we look at. There's the data source certification, which is something that exists in the Tableau ecosystem as a native functionality, meaning Tableau rolled out the data source certification a while ago. And how it would work is an admin or a data steward or someone from your DBA team or from your development team who's familiar enough with the database and the data source would have to manually go and verify that this data source is checked as a certified piece of content. And as you can imagine, this would cause a lot of effort, both on the side of understanding what makes a data source certified, what are some of the ground rules, and what are some of the processes that need to be in place. But also, that didn't mean that the data source was prone to no error at that stage. Things go wrong, and when they do, someone had to go again manually uncheck that this data source is no longer certified. So we bring automation to that entire environment to ultimately help with that process of removing human error and saving you some time. Now, as you were just mentioning, we also have the dashboard certification, which is an extension that's now available on the Tableau Exchange. So if you right now, and I notice there's a lot of folks who use Tableau Desktop, if you drag and drop one of those extensions onto your dashboard, you'll notice us as one of the more top used extensions. And in just a moment, I'll show you exactly how you can utilize that. So again, you add a little bit more trust through your automated testing processes so that your creators as well as your viewers are able to consume data accurately.
Thank you very much, Ace. And by the way, the certification that we do on the dashboard is something that is unique to Wiiisdom. It's something that we've actually spent quite a bit of time developing, and that is now available to all Wiiisdom customers. So during the demo here, we'll be talking about testing and then how the entire process can be automated. So first, we'll talk about testing. Essentially on what we're going to show today is there are 5 different types of tests that we do. The first one is about the accuracy. So we're going to show you, for example, I have a worksheet. Okay, I've done a lot of preparation before, but I've got a worksheet. I've got a lot of self-service users, and I want to know essentially, is the data in my worksheet that is used for my dashboard, is it accurate? And here, essentially, we're able to do some SQL testing, for example, where we're going to query directly the source, and then we're going to compare the results from the source directly to the worksheet that is used for the dashboard. So this is number 1. Number 2, it's about the user experience. So we're going to show essentially here, does my dashboard open? Do my filters work? Are my buttons working when I click on them? All these little things that are very important, because usually, by the way, when somebody consumes Tableau dashboards, the 2 first things that they will see is it's slow or it's fast. And the second thing, does it open or not? So this is really critical. Then the third part is about security. So for example, here we're going to simulate, well, I'm going to check, I want to see what Ace has got access to. So we're going to be able to see what Ace has got access to, providing that we've got all the right security worked out on that. Number 4 is performances. That was just covered by Ace. And then number 5 is regression testing, where you've got side-by-side comparison, A to B type of testing. And essentially there, you can do this. You can use it, for example, if you've got a migration from on-prem to the cloud. Or, for example, you want to monitor the changes. So you've got some dashboards that were changed and you want to see actually where the changes are. So there are multiple use cases. Once you've done all that testing, the phase 2 is promotion. So essentially here, we're able to move content from dev to test, as an example, or wherever you want. Number 3 here, actually, we're not going to talk about version control here today. It's something that we'll address on another session. And actually, we're really excited because we're actually going to introduce that next week at TC24. And it is, I can tell you in advance, we have an awesome UI. It is extremely, extremely user-friendly. So it's actually really amazing. Number 4, of course, is the certification. So you've done your testing, you've promoted, you want to make sure it's accurate, visible to everyone. This is what we're going to do. And all that, actually, all this lemon skit here, all actually can fit in a CI/CD pipeline. You can actually automate all that and put it part of your governance. So these are the tests, again, that we'll be covering today. And before we go to the demo, so again, is if somebody's going to TC next week, just feel free to put a note in the chat, or to let Karasoft know, or let me know. And we'll be more than happy to see you on Monday at the booth to give you a wristband, get you registered, and then get you on a cruise to go and check the sunset. So we're going to have an awesome time. And I heard Ace is going to be the DJ on the boat. So he doesn't know yet, but I'm sure he'll do a very good job on that.
Surprise guest.
So, Ace, let's finish talking about slides. So overall, Ace is going to go to the demo and he's going to show you essentially how you do the testing today within Tableau. And then after that, he will go and do a deep dive, in Wiiisdom on how you can do it to show you how you can certify and build trust in your Tableau dashboards. Ace, I'll let you take it over. I'll stop sharing.
Okay, great. Let me just go ahead and share my screen with everyone here first. Moment.
As long as you do better than me trying to find the share location, that the share button, that's good. So it looks like you figured it out. So your screen
Is it okay?
dark,
Are
but
you
it's
able to
going to
see?
appear. Okay, here it is. It's all good, Ace.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Bruno, for setting the stage here. And first of all, I noticed that there's quite a bit of developers on this call, which is great, because I also spent a lot of time as a developer at different stages of a dashboard, whether it was during the development cycle or it was during the migration and post-deployment, and understanding if the dashboard was deployed correctly and what are some of the steps that really go into it. So before I jump into Wiiisdom, I want to kind of talk about how testing is done right now. And this might resonate with some of you who are doing testing either today or at some point of your life cycle as a dev. Generally, what we do is we open up the dashboard and we start looking around. Typically, this is our first indication if something is faulty, because when we're looking at a dashboard, and if you're familiar with Superstore data, this is exactly one of those dashboards. But we always look at the KPIs on top, and then we look at some charts on the bottom. But for the most part, I'll take a look at the numbers. Are these numbers matching my expectation for my level of understanding with the data? And what I mean by that is, if these KPIs are all 0, that's a problem. That's an easy problem to identify. Similarly, if these numbers are more than what they should be, if they're multiplied by 2 or 3 or 5 times, again, there's a problem there. Maybe there's an issue with my joins. Maybe there's something going on with my data sources and databases. Similarly, if there are blanks, I have to understand what's going on. So these are easy to identify. They're happening visually, but that's not all that we're doing with testing. We're also looking at a number of rows, making sure that's matching our backend tables and databases, or whatever our data source may be, if it's a flat file or if it's a live connection. Then we start interacting with this dashboard. I start filtering through some of these items and just look around and see if the right visuals are being interacted with. And is that slicing and dicing happening accordingly so that functionality exists within the dashboard? But again, at this stage, we still have to validate the data. And validation of data can happen in the form of checking and seeing if my count of customers for the region of South, does that equal to 77? Or for John Lee, with this variation of filters, are we having $3,660 for sales? Again, so we look at this both at an aggregated level and from a row level accuracy. So every click that we do here takes some time. And of course, with the number of filters and parameters and interactivity that exists, you can understand that the options are endless. So how can we make the same changes or interact with the dashboard for testing purposes on Wiiisdom? So now I'll jump into the application. And for those of you who are on the call and maybe have not been familiar with the application here so far, I'll give you a quick tour of what we're looking at. So on the left side, you'll notice the tests component, which has some pre-existing items. These are the tests that I've created previously as part of this package that you'll see here. This project, the tests that I click on them, you notice that there are a series of tasks associated with them. And those tasks, think of them as the clicks that you do from a developer standpoint to get to your testing purposes. So for example, in my customer dashboard testing, we're going to see the same test that I just did on the other dashboard that we saw. And that test starts with an OpenViz task. And what an OpenViz task is, similar to a lot of these tasks that we see on the bottom, they're predefined tasks that we have in our tasks library for the functional tests that allow us to natively work with the Tableau ecosystem based on all the functionalities that are available. things like setting the filter for my dates or my values or parameters, and checking to make sure those values match my expectation. So we use this library to essentially put together the pieces of the puzzle that goes through this entire experience of clicking on items. So in my case, I use an open viz. I navigate to my Tableau environment using the search button here. And this search button allows me to connect to whether Tableau Cloud or on-prem. There's no limitation on how you connect to items, but then you have to navigate to that piece of content, in my case, which I've navigated down to my customer's dashboard. Great. That's the very first step of every testing, finding the dashboard or dashboards you want to test for, so that next you can go and ensure that the other values are setting there. In my test, I'm checking to see if my values for my filter are actually equal to the numbers that they're supposed to be. So meaning, does my year filter come with the values of 2017, 18, 19, and 20? Then I'm interacting with my dashboard using the set filter item to limit the data to only year 2019. So one of the filters that's available on the dashboard. And I'm duplicating this process to, again, filter it now for category or filter it by segment. And lastly, I check to ensure that that data validates. My sum of sales has to be greater than $40,000 for all of these items. Okay, I covered quite a bit of items here, and I don't want to go too deep before I show you what this actually looks and feels like. So I'll run this test. What's going to happen now is you'll notice in this console down here, there's a code that's being generated. This code is using the batch file in JSON to essentially use the REST API and JavaScript API, which is publicly available from Tableau's side, and we've just created a UI around it. But we're essentially utilizing Python to create this test and the APIs to connect and interact with that visual using these tasks that we see here. In just a moment, what you'll notice is a browser will open, and these tasks will go through a sequential order. So they'll run from top to bottom, meaning first open viz happens, then we validate the filters are equal to the numbers that we see, and ultimately go through some of the other items that we have in our indication here. Okay,
and the tests are very easy to do. So like what you see on the left, it's like it's a drag and drop. So you just select what you want to test, and then you just ask Wiiisdom essentially to run the test. It's very, very easy to do, and it's really drag and drop.
That's right. And you'll notice the browser is now open, but I'm completely hands off, meaning usually this is a good time for me to go grab a cup of coffee or stretch or take a break, because Wiiisdom is now interacting with my dashboard. And notice on the filters on the right side, all those filters are being selected based on the values that I defined for it on Wiiisdom. So all those interactivity that you might be spending time on, you create them once here, you set them, and you forget. And in this test, it looks like as I go through it, it tells me at the end whether this test runs successfully or if it fails. And I'll just wait a moment here for the results to come, and we'll see that the test actually fails. And for us to understand what failed, with every test, there is a report that's generated to provide us with a summary of exactly what happened. And I can see in the summary the date that the test was running, the performance of each task, so how long did it take for it to open, or set the values for those items that we want. But ultimately, navigate down to the error that resulted this report to fail. And I can see that it tells me my sum of sales, it's in fact not always greater than 40K for all those items, when there is a value of 26K that also comes out from it. So very easy for me to flag items and troubleshoot and understand, well, is this an issue from a DBA side, or if it's a development issue? But what I want to show you here is another item. Notice that when we looked at this dashboard, it said that this dashboard is certified. But now that we tested it and we know that the test failed, when I refresh this dashboard now, what you'll notice is that it tells me that this dashboard is no longer certified. And I'm just going to wait for a moment. And this is important because when tests fail, you need to communicate it with your audiences so that they're no longer making those important decisions. The numbers are not getting in the hands of executives for extended times, making decisions. This has been already communicated. But not only is your audience aware of this, you as the developer and the tester are also aware of this because you've been notified, and now you can start troubleshooting it, and you can go back and see exactly what's going on. So not only are you communicating immediately with your audiences, you're notified yourself faster, and you're adding just a little bit of extra layer of trust within your entire ecosystem.
And Ace, are you able eventually, if it's decertified, are there some flows that you can put in place to isolate these dashboards?
Absolutely.
It's in prod. Yeah.
So that's a question that sometimes comes up because we have the built-in native functionalities that exist here, and it's geared towards a wider audiences who just want to start testing and navigate through items. But if you'd like to take things to the next level, we can absolutely use the REST API and the batch files that we have to ultimately create a custom flow. When things are decertified, you're moving them entirely to different projects, maybe moving them to a decertified project so that they're completely isolated. Your end users are not necessarily using them. You come back here, you look at the test results, and you make the modifications.
So each time you have a test, you have a report. Is that correct?
That's correct. So with every test, you get a report, and you get the archive of all the reports that have gone through the time with their successes, with their failures, so you can come back and make the changes as you like.
So essentially, if somebody comes up and tells you, hey, Ace, show me, have you tested this dashboard? Hasn't been certified or not? What were the results? Essentially,
Absolutely.
here, you have the results that are available.
Absolutely. And that's important, right? Because when you tell someone that the report is not accurate, the second question might be, well, why not? What's inaccurate? What's the result? So with a report like this, you can give them not just the proof, but also the next steps, the issues, the detail that caused that failure.
You bet.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to walk through the certification process, but was there anything else there?
Just one thing before we go to the certification, we had a third poll is, with Madison is, we wanted to know who's doing the testing today, in your organization, in your agency. So who is doing the test today? Is it done by the developers, by the QA team, by IT? By the consumers, by the viewers, essentially. So here, of course, it's a single choice. So, and the aim is to understand who primarily is actually doing the testing today. So again, developers, QA, IT, consumers. Thank you very much for voting. So let's see what the results are, Madison. Okay, so yeah, no surprise here. It's always the developers are really typically doing a lot of the tests, and on more mature organizations. So this is 63%, as you can see. And then on more mature organizations, you actually see the QA that is involved. So here's 13%. And some other organizations will involve their business. In 19% of the cases and 6% of the cases, it's IT. So this is not a surprise because one of the main challenges, nobody really likes testing. Trust me, we've seen that over the years. And typically people that know the best, the dashboards are actually the developers. So, okay, thank you very much, Madison. So let's move on to the next step, Ace.
Absolutely. I really like these polls because it not only gives us an idea of who's on the call, but it's very reflective on how testing is happening, when the testing is taking place. So thank you for those polls. And we just looked at how we create a test here, but I want to walk you through just how easy it is to define that certification flow for yourself. So going back to the task list here, once I'm happy with these task lists and I know this is the data that I want to test for, and this is the process for it, all we need to go do is in the post-process actions tab, we have both the data source certification as well as the dashboard certification. All we need to do for data source certification is provide a path for the data source to be certified. And I'll show you in a moment what that looks like. And for the dashboard certification, just like we saw, there's an extension there. And using the endpoint ID and secret, when you bring the extension into your dashboard, the first thing it asks you to do is provide it with these two items. And as soon as you plug them in, you're done. So within a few clicks, you're ready to have a certified dashboard that looks like this, or a certified data source that may have a check mark like this next to it. So your users, especially your creators, are always aware whether a data source has been refreshed or has been tested properly or not. As you can see, the steps in between certifying content is very easy, and our goal has been always to help audiences focus more on what matters the most, which is the testing flow. So now we saw how we can create a test on Wiiisdom for Tableau, but still, if you have to come back here and click Run Test, this is not truly automated testing. Automation comes from scheduling this test so it runs at specific cadence, whether it's post your ETL jobs or after your data source refreshes or post deployment. And we can do that very simply by clicking on this schedule button on the bottom right here. And again, we'll see a series of code here. And if you're familiar with items like Windows Task Scheduler or cron, you know how to use this. But if you are not familiar, again, not a problem. You can click on the Windows Task Scheduler or any of the documentations down here to be directed to our library of documentation, which takes you through a step-by-step process on how to do this. And you'll notice within 5 steps, you're able to understand how to use a task scheduler to ultimately create a task, provided with the cadence on how often you want this to run. And lastly, which part of the code where to plug. Again, super simple, very intuitive for you to be able to use to automate your testing. So great, now you've created your automated testing, but in the cases where your test runs in the morning and you have a number of different tests and you want to come back and see which ones failed, which one have succeeded, what we can offer is the integration tab. The integration tab allows you to plug in your email or Slack or any webhook that you may want to add in here so that you're notified of these test results when they start, if they succeed, but again, more importantly, when they fail. So you catch those failures much faster, you start troubleshooting them much faster, and you provide that second layer of proof for your audiences. Here in the integration tab, what you'll notice also is the Postgres database integration. This is an optional feature, but highly suggested, because with this enabled, what you can do is now collect data around all your tests, meaning how many tests have you ran and what do those tests mean? How many of them are functional or regression, performance tests, and how can you analyze them so that from a governance and administrative standpoint, you get a much clearer view of exactly those results. And let me show you what that means. So this BI summary dashboard is just an example. It's very powerful. You can use it actually. It's because it's online on our GitHub page and it's free for you to take. But the goal here is to show you what is possible using the repository and the schemas that we have from that Postgres to see not only all of your test results and the success rates of them, but the breakdown of them based on the different types of tests that we have. And I'll show you exactly in just a moment what the different types mean. But in this case, we have functional tests and regressions and the success rates and failure, but also at which times of the day are these tests running with more failures? Is there a trend between certain data sources with more failures or certain content that's failing or certain timelines?
And Ace, here I've got a question. So obviously here you're able to monitor all the tests that you have got running daily or whenever you want. So this is, you can monitor the automation, the test result, what's certified, decertified, etc. But let's say this is a great view for a manager, somebody who manages quality there. But how about like some organizations are a little bit more decentralized? So let's say you've got Lisa, who is a report developer, and she's also managing the quality for a specific department. Would she be able to monitor just her tests with that? Is this something possible today or not?
Absolutely. This can be configured in different ways, right? You can configure the Postgres that it's a shared repository, so all that information is one place. You can have it at an individual repository, so it's only for one person. Or maybe your governance leader would like to know how every tester is doing comparatively, and you can define that per user. Customizability is endless because there's quite a bit of data that we can have. And this dashboard that we see here is actually one of the conversations we have with a lot of our clients, is that it's a great starting point. It helps answer a lot of questions, but sometimes they have more targeted questions and they want to make it focused. And we always recommend that they utilize it in their own being.
Thank you, Ace.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I want to jump back into the application just a second here, because we spent quite a bit of time looking at one of the tests that we have, which is the functional test. We have a test for extracts to make sure your extracts are refreshed at the right time. Have they been refreshed yesterday, today? And if they're not, go back and look at them so you're always aware. We also have regression and cross environment tests, as well as performance tests, which I'd really love to take a moment to show you, because all of these tests, while they are their own category, they're very simple to make and very intuitive. So let's take a look at the regression and cross environment tests. First, I want to show you the report of a regression test. In my regression test, I'm looking at 17 different dashboards, and I want to make sure all these 17 dashboards have remained the same, or if there are issues, what kind of issues there may be. So looking at the report here, and I'm going to open it in my browser just so it gives me a little bit more real estate just to review, especially for everyone on the call. I can see it tells me how many views were in the scope, how many of them succeeded, but more importantly, how many failed and how many had errors. Now, and I go down in this list, I can see that one of the dashboards had some errors. One of the other dashboard had some failures, and immediately it tells me visually what those issues are. So I can click on the first dashboard and see that, okay, this is fine. This looks great. Next one. And I see immediately what kind of issues there might be. So if I can go back between these two dashboards, and it's a little hard right now with the zoom up here, but let me just make this window a little bit easier to read. So notice the issues and the errors that we're finding are very delicate. They're only at the pixel level. They're almost looking at even spaces, or even a dot added here has been identified. Well, the reason behind that is because the very first check that we do is image to image. It's almost like taking a print of each dashboard and putting it on top of each other and identifying the errors and the issues that have been caused now. This is usually a very strong indication of which person or which team may need to be notified of this, because you may know that the migration team perhaps had to do something with this, or the upgrade team. But if you need additional detail, you can also look into our summary data, review that, and see if the same filters exist within the same timeline, or if those values are different by any means.
Hey, Asen, the summary of the data, where is that data coming from here?
This is the data from the dashboard itself. So this is purely on what's being displayed on the dashboard on Tableau.
Okay, so nothing to do with the worksheets. It's actually essentially the data in the dashboard that was sent from the worksheet. Awesome. Okay, very interesting.
So this is our regression model. And as you can see, very powerful, and it's very useful for those moments where you're upgrading your environments, or you have content from your alpha to beta, but you want to see before you push content out how it looks. And the cross environment test is essentially exactly the same, but it's great for deployment plan. It's for when you're pushing content from one place to another, whether it's from on-prem to cloud or from on-prem to on-prem different projects. Very similar approach, and that's why I didn't want to spend too much time in each of them, because they're both very similar, just slight use cases that are different. And as you can see, we're able to identify the issues and the challenges, whether they're color or shapes or size, but most importantly, if it's data, that's the problem, and how can we utilize these tests.
I've got a question for you in terms of the regression testing, like we work with a lot of federal customers, for example, and when it comes to colors, for example, could you use that part for 508? So are you able to say, look, it's supposed to be this color and it's not that color? Is this something that's possible there?
Of course. When you have a baseline of what your color is supposed to be on a dashboard, and for whatever reason, when that dashboard is now pushed to production, or if it's public facing, you can always run a regression so you are aware if things are different. If you're familiar with 508 compliancy, you know that color is a big portion. The way your filters are viewed as a big one. So there's a number of different items that all have to be standardized, and you don't want to leave anything to fall through the cracks. And a test like this can scale, so you don't have to worry about always opening two dashboards on 2 pages, looking at them, And as we saw on the poll, testing generally happens either pre-deployment or sometimes when something is wrong. And that's because when we test in development and we push content out, we tend to forget about that content until the business comes and tells us, hey, something is wrong, what's going on here? And that should never be the case. Testing should happen every day, but it's not realistic because we all have busy schedules and this number of dashboards are growing. So with an automated testing like this, you're able to solve with that.
Yeah, years ago, we actually did some contests with customers and trying to see if they were actually able to spot the differences. And the reality is, in over 80% of the cases, people were not able to see all the differences. So, and these were not too challenging, actually. So,
yeah, it's often hard to find the issues, but then once you find them, you realize
Yep.
that this issue may have been out there for a while. So the very last test that I want to show everyone is our performance test. This is something that I want to show because it's so easy to use and it's so powerful, especially if you're experiencing any sort of performance issues, and how can you utilize this in order to make changes with your dashboard. So with the performance test, what we have is a number of items here that help with the severity of the test. How strong of a push do we want to apply to a dashboard to be able to monitor and see if it's able to handle it? And what I mean by that is you can define the parameters like how long you want this test to run for. In my case, 60 seconds. How many users do you want this dashboard to be targeted by concurrently? So at the very same time, how many users are opening this dashboard to see if it's able to handle that? And also we have some additional items like pacing and what you see in SLA. Lastly, define what the visits are. And from the user pool, you can define if you want to add specific target users who may have different levels of data access to them. So you can get as close as possible to your user's experience. Once you define the severity of the test, then you define your SLAs. What is your performance goal at your organization? Generally, we hear 5 seconds or less. Some organizations have 3 seconds or less. Some organizations I've worked for have had 10. If you have anywhere between 25 to 50, I think we have to have a completely different conversation. But the point is, with the severity set and with the SLA defined, what you're left with is ultimately, again, a report that's very comprehensive and helpful for you to be able to take to the next step. Well, was this a success test or not based on that SLA? Was there enough availability, and what does your aptic score look like?
So there is, in terms of the performance testing here, I've actually, I've seen it in motion with some customers, and I can tell you it is extremely easy to implement. You don't need to have any coding understanding or any programming experience or so. I mean, Ace, I know you've been, in the past, you were part of the professional services at Tableau, and you used to actually use Tab Jolt. But here is, to be fair, a lot of customers, they love it because it is extremely easy to put together. So you don't need to have any experience in coding. So it's as simple as what Ace has shown there. Is you just need to know what your SLA is, what you want to test, and decide, okay, what load you're going to put in. So it's very easy. And on the top of it, we've got our own engine behind to run the test, which is extremely reliable. So it's a Wiiisdom engine. And of course, these results, they're stored in a database, right? You've got access to the history.
Yes, with the Postgres integration, you're able to store this and you can analyze it at different states and different times and see if there's any trends. Are your dashboards performing differently? Which
Got
they
it.
probably are. If your dashboards are slower at peak hours when more people are active, they're probably going to be running slower. If you run them on a weekend, they're probably going to be running much faster because no one's using them. But ultimately, like Bruno mentioned, our goal here really is to create an experience that allows you to focus a lot more on the tests, so that as you define these tests and you fine tune them, you really try to understand which is the better test that you want to run, when are you running them, and come back and analyze the results.
By the way, this test that you see here, of course, works on Tableau Server, but also works on Tableau Cloud. So that's another thing that is unique to Wiiisdom. And also a lot of customers use that with embedded analytics. They want to make sure
Mhm.
that the dashboard is visible within 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds with a certain load and a true load. And this is something that we can simulate and validate or not.
That's exactly correct. And I want to be cognizant of the time here and give everyone some time if there's quick Q&A. But before I do that, just to wrap this up here, what we see in this performance test is as close as it gets to a user experience, because notice in my response times scatter plot, almost every point is falling within the range of expectation. So below the 5 seconds here, but there are 3 items that are falling before that. So what could the cause for that be? And I can understand a little bit deeper on that in my events log, which shows that the first times that this dashboard or this series of dashboard opened up, it was the slowest. We can see here, those are the ones that are running the slowest, and every consecutive motion is faster. If you're familiar with the Tableau ecosystem, you know that the caching mechanism is a big one. And we use caching at Tableau to have that first load happen the slowest, so our users can have a much faster experience. And we're visually seeing exactly that indication, because again, our engine, the way it works is that it physically opens up a view and it captures how long that view took to open. So it's not by some code, we're not exactly sure how or what kind of APIs are hitting at which moment. The generation of this result is much closer to the user experience, and we can see that indication here.
Awesome, Ace. Before we go to the questions, we got last poll with Madison is the
Excellent.
poll number 4. It's essentially we want to know how long do you need to test a dashboard, on average, of course. So is it less than 30 minutes, 30 minutes to an hour, 1 to 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, 3 to 5 hours, 5 to 8 hours or more? So again, on average, how long do you need to test a dashboard? Single choice, of course, on average. So less than 30 minutes, 30 minutes to an hour, 1 to 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, 3 to 5 hours, 5 to 8 hours, and more. Well, let's see what the results are, and then we'll go after that. So, okay, 2 to 3 hours. So this is really the number one and 33%. So this is pretty honest, because usually people say, I do that in a couple of minutes. So actually that is very good. We've got an audience that's used to do some of the testing. So 33% for 2 to 3 hours, then 17%, 30 minutes, 30 minutes to an hour, 1 to 2 hours. Okay. And then in the case of 8% of the audience, 3 to 5 hours, another 8%, 5 to 8 hours. And of course, that depends also the type of reports you have, how are they enterprise reports or not, and how critical they are. And of course, if you need to certify them or not. Okay, so Ace, we got a couple questions here coming
Sure.
over. So I see a first question from Kevin that I see. So the question you have is, do you see users implementing their style guides? Do you see users implementing their style guides and testing to see if they are being followed?
Mhm. I absolutely do. And this is something we talk about with customers, right? Sometimes from your branding perspective of your dashboards, you probably have to have a very standardized process on how things look, right? You have your color palettes, or you have your logo and your filters that are supposed to be in a specific place. But of course, when you have developers from different sets of skills, you don't necessarily see that always being followed to the T. And running a regression around these 2 items not only helps with you being able to communicate that a lot clearer with your developers, but it also enables them to understand, okay, which areas are actually failing, and it helps you ultimately get a clear response to them. So yes, absolutely happens.
We also have another question from Scott asking, are you able to test business rules with this tool?
So business rules, potentially meaning the data validation portion of it, there's a number of different ways you can do it here. With the data validation, we looked at assert data rule here. Assert data rule essentially allows you to create rules around what this number should be like, what the expectations are. But it actually opens up. We only scratched the surface today. If you want to get deeper into understanding how you can run more complex formula-based rules, we offer that as well. So you can define rules based on if statements and based on the different functions that we have. Or if you'd like to take it even a layer deeper, the assert SQL equals task allows you to not only validate the data, but validate it with the backend tables. So this task independently connects to your backend databases using a JDBC URL. This database could be your local SQL or your Oracle, or it could be a Snowflake. It could be anything that's on-prem or cloud. You ultimately have to find the right way to connect to it, write the query that you're querying by, and ultimately validate the results of your database and your Tableau. Something that developers do for a while, and it probably takes some time because that data often is not in the same order, right? You're checking your bar charts compared to your table. So with this task, you don't have to worry about exporting into different formats. Wiiisdom will handle it for you.
We got time for 2 more questions. Okay, let me go and go through the list. Okay, here, Raj, how long does it take to build a test?
I think that's a really great question, actually, because we spent a lot of time with our clients understanding how are they doing testing. And testing can be done as simple as making sure the views actually open. One of the biggest issues that we see at client sites is that these views are not opening for a variety of reasons, right? Maybe the data source is not refreshed properly, or things changed in the backend tables. Now they are reflected on the front side and the views are not opening up, but the business is telling you. But running a test for that is very simple. All you need to do is create one task called OpenViz and run it for a number of different views and make sure they all match your expectation. Now, if you have a more complex theory where you want to validate not only all the functionalities of your environment, but also validate the data at every stage of that, that will take some more time, right? But because the the application is very intuitive to use, oftentimes what we'll see is you're creating repetitive steps here. So I'm filtering the dashboard by year, but then I'm filtering it by category. I'm filtering it by segment. So I have to just define these items, move them around as I'd like, and really create that scenario base for myself. So based on the complexity, it depends, but it's usually very easy to start and ultimately add on to.
Awesome,
So
Ace. And then the final question is, how difficult is it to connect to Tableau?
Okay, so that's another, I think that's another good question because as I mentioned, we can connect to both Tableau Server and Tableau Cloud. And how we do that is using what we call a context variable up here. Think of context as essentially your credentials to connecting to an environment. The context will take your URL, your Tableau version, your username, the site you're connecting to, along with the personal access token and some connected apps information. Once you have this, that's it. You test your connection, make sure you're able to connect to that environment, and you're good. Now, the good thing here is you can actually have multiple contexts per project. So again, if you have different sites, different users, different environments, cloud, on-prem, all of those can be part of this entire flow here.
Thank you very much, Asen. So Asen, you better be ready for next week for TC and then to be the DJ on the boat and, also at the top, on the floor at the Tableau conference. So I'm really looking forward for that. Just if it doesn't work out, we've got a plan B on that. So
I'm excited too. I hope to see a lot of you over there too. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
So, hey, thank you everyone for your attention, and remember to be good and to be cool and certify your dashboards.